This action research plan will discuss how I will improve my teaching through student engagement and creative classrooms. For my first practical experience, I was placed in a Year 4 Stage 2 class in a government-funded school in Western Sydney. The following data was recorded. The school's planning and reporting are guided by the School Excellence Framework, which promotes a comprehensive approach to student learning, well-being, and community engagement. The classroom had a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere, with student work proudly displayed on the walls. This helped create a sense of belonging and ownership for the students, aligning with the school's focus on student well-being. Desks were arranged in groups of 6, and students were seated based on their ability levels. Class dojos were awarded, however, while effective for maintaining discipline, did not seem to translate into long-term intrinsic motivation for learning. The teacher's approach, while orderly and well managed, leaned more toward compliance than true engagement. During lessons and different KLAs, it was the same students that were constantly the most engaged, while others remained passive. This suggests that the teacher's approach, while functional, could be more inclusive of different learning styles. The level of abilities in the class was diverse. There was 1/3 of students excelling in numeracy and literacy, while 4 students required extra support in nearly all KLAs. The remainder of the class sat at a sound level. The students had a generally positive approach to learning, interacting with their peers, and on most occasions were able to follow the instructions, but most of the time they needed to be rephrased or demonstrated in different ways to ensure understanding. Although classroom layout was effective in delivering content, I noticed it restricted creativity and hindered the implementation of more flexible, student-centered learning approaches. The structured seating arrangement, combined with the regimented lesson plans, did not encourage movement or collaboration, which are crucial elements of a creative classroom. One of the key learning issues I observed was the limited engagement during structured English lessons. While the regimented approach worked for some students, it left others disengaged. This was particularly evident among students who were either at a lower or higher ability level. Another key issue was the diverse needs of the ELAD students who often struggled to keep up with the content during writing tasks. Gibbon stresses that students from language backgrounds other than English require scaffolding to successfully engage with content and develop their academic language. The 4 students diagnosed with autism also required more differentiated instruction, which was challenging within the confines of the current lesson structure. This takes me to my question: what can I do to foster deeper student engagement, motivation, and the diverse needs of my students? I plan to adopt the Creative Classrooms pedagogy. As Sawyer states, it emphasizes stimulating the imagination of a student, encourages risk-taking behaviors, and promotes problem-solving skills through specific learning activities. In the subject of English, these would be important elements of learning for students to be able to explore language and literacy in an engaging way. This pedagogy aligns with 21st century education by preparing students with skills like communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. Additionally, Munns and Sawyer nurturing cognitive, affective, and operative engagement for students is imperative for academic success. Through the use of activities that are built around role play, improvisation, and inquiry-based learning, I will create a classroom environment that encourages students to actively participate in their learning. I feel that creative approaches are imperative for English subjects as it allows for nurturing of different perspectives, characters, and writing styles. My main aim is to encourage students to engage with text in creative ways and allow for a developed love of reading and writing. The Creative Classrooms pedagogy aligns with the principles of the MEE Motivation and Engagement Framework, which emphasizes both psychological and pedagogical factors in student engagement. Adopting the Creative Classrooms pedagogy in English will transform my classroom into a space where students are encouraged to explore language, take ownership of their learning, and engage deeply with text. Here are my 3 learning experiences. For my data collection and data analysis, I will be gathering evidence through a variety of means, including direct observations, student reflection, and work samples, to gauge student engagement across the cognitive, affective, and operational dimensions. The triangulation of analysis will produce evidence to help me evaluate my pedagogical shift towards a creative classroom approach. The data will be assessed using the MEE framework and the current Australian curriculum to identify whether students are actively engaging at a deeper level of thinking, emotionally invested in their learning, and demonstrating effective participation in tasks. The focus will be on how students engage throughout the learning process rather than achieving a specific end product. However, I will also be able to monitor if students are meeting the required outcomes for subject content. The tasks I have created, like role playing, poster creation, and video production, serve as vehicles for motivating, cognitively challenging, and emotionally connecting students to the learning material. For my first data collection, I will be taking on the role as the observer throughout the 3 learning experiences. I will observe by circulating the room and making sure I am allowing enough time to adequately provide enough data for future analysis. Using the schedule I have created, I will be able to take notes on the different experiences to monitor student engagement. The schedule has direct links to cognitive, affective, social, and overall participation, allowing me to analyze their engagement towards my creative classroom approach. I will upload the information into a table that will be accessible and easy to read. The use of Observations, my Year 4 classroom, will allow me to identify how my students are engaging in their lessons. Specifically, it may allow me to see certain patterns and make decisions based off their real-time learning output. It would also allow for me to have a bigger scope of understanding of how things are progressing in the classroom and whether the method I have chosen is appropriate over other methods that I may miss. Cohen indicates that observation and observational data provide a basis for insight into the realities of student engagement and effective methods in the classroom. However, with this in mind, there are things that I need to be mindful of. Observing students requires a lot of time and effort, and having me in the classroom may be a distraction for students, which may cause them to behave differently. Additionally, since I am the one observing what I see in my classroom, my own perspectives may affect how I interpret the information, potentially making misjudgments about the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of my method. For my second source of data, I'll be incorporating student self-reflection at the end of each learning experience and during group discussions when time allows. Students will use paper to write down their answers to the reflection questions as seen in my schedule. I will follow Munns and Woodward 3 Real framework that encourage them to think about their learning process, engagement, and collaboration. Additionally, I'll record group discussions and take notes during class conversations to capture their collective thoughts. This combination of individual and group reflection will give me a more well-rounded view of how students are engaging with the content and each other. Self-assessment has been seen to be a valuable tool for developing students' metacognitive skills, as it encourages them to consider their own abilities for learning. However, I will have to be mindful that some students may struggle to express their thoughts or feelings clearly, especially when attempting to reflect. Overall, self-assessment seems to provide clear insights into certain individual learning processes of each student, and additionally, understand the impact of my strategies and their effectiveness in fostering reflection. While I highly value this approach, it may also generate a lot of data that would need to be separated and identified, which could prove to be time-consuming. There is also a possibility that students may not feel comfortable being open and upfront in group settings, as I have previously observed. Dawson notes that data derived from interactive mechanisms can highlight the social aspects of learning, however, will require intensive methods of interpretation to avoid misleading conclusions. This means I will need to be careful when I interpret students' reflections, as social aspects like moods or peer pressure could impact how students respond. Regardless of these challenges, reflections will also show me to perceive how students are engaging both by themselves and as a class, and allow me to develop my own personal skills as a result. The third sample I will be collecting will be work samples. Throughout the learning experiences, students will work on their storyboards, which will be collected and used as a summative assessment. Photos of their progress will be uploaded to the schedule, and their final video uploads will serve as a part of the formative assessment. I'll use the coding to track and analyse student engagement throughout the learning experience, focusing on how their work aligns with the relevant syllabus outcomes. When it comes to observing student engagement via interpreting work samples, I need to ensure I am aware of both the benefits and potential challenges that may arise. On the positive side, work samples would likely provide clear and specific evidence of learning, allowing me to track their growth of learning over time. This also provides me with the opportunity to reflect on their engagement and see areas where they may require important feedback to assist with further development. Whilst this is valuable information, I need to be mindful of the fact that the sampled information can only provide one side of the picture of learning, as there may be variability in quality and grading may be subjective to the person marking it. Miller enforces this point by acknowledging that data derived from student work samples need to be considered in the context of circumstances of each individual student in order to accurately reflect students' progression. Using Munns and Sawyer's observation and reflection guide would allow me to analyse my data in an effective way. With this in mind, I have created a table where I'm able to monitor student engagement levels throughout each analysis and combine them to allow for an overall engagement marker. The use of this table will allow me to track and analyse the student engagement over time, identifying effective methods of teaching and areas that may require adjustment or improvement. This collection of data and reflection will allow for my further professional development on my part in an efficient and supportive way. By triangulating observational notes, self-reflections, and work samples, I will gain a holistic understanding of how my creative classroom approach in my English lessons impacts my students. It will also provide insight as to whether I need to make changes to get the best from my students. As Munns and Woodward state, engagement is not a one-dimensional construct, but a complex interplay of cognitive, emotional, and behavioural elements. Therefore, I also need to keep into consideration that I cannot just justify engagement over 3 learning experiences. I can, however, use the data to look at where some students may be lacking engagement and look at ways to change my creative approach to motivate students in the learning environment. Dawson notes effective data collection involves understanding not just what students produce, but how they feel about their learning experiences, which can inform pedagogical practices. Therefore, I must use each type of data collection in an effective way for my overall analysis. To reveal patterns in student behaviour and participation, I will use the observational data. This will help me to assess their active involvement and emotional investment during lessons, showing both engagement and disengagement levels. To provide insight into students' perceptions of their learning experiences and collaborative efforts, I will use the self-reflection data. This will help me identify areas of strength and potential improvement in my teaching strategies. However, I need to make sure I account for children who may not feel comfortable to express themselves, as this may hinder engagement levels. For both product quality and the processes behind their creation, I will use the student work samples, enabling me to track individual progress and understand how effectively students connect with the content. By integrating these multiple data resources, I can draw informed conclusions about the effectiveness of my creative classroom approach of engagement and disengagement levels in my English lessons, and therefore this will enable me to make necessary adjustments to enhance student engagement in future lessons. My goal for my action research project is to turn my Year 4 English classroom into a lively, student-centred space where innovation is encouraged and creativity flourishes. My intention is to break down the stereotype that only a small percentage of people are creative. Rather, I think that any student, given the correct environment and encouragement, has the capacity to be a creative learner. Through my action research, I want to learn more about how creative pedagogy can increase academic achievement and spark student involvement. I am aware, though, that these improvements will take time to materialise. Maintaining this strategy over an extended length of time is crucial to ensuring that students truly benefit from creative and hands-on activities, and that any improvements come from real learning experiences rather than the novelty of change. My approach aligns with the Professional Teaching Standards 6.1, 6.2, and 6.4 and supports my growth as a reflective practitioner. I see this action research as a foundation for my ongoing professional development, helping me critically assess my practice and implement meaningful changes that enhance learning outcomes for all students. While I am very excited about the potential impact of this research, I also need to stay vigilant about potential obstacles. I must be careful to analyse the collected data objectively and to remain open to feedback. I also need to remember that being a first year teacher, my workload and lesson planning will take time. Therefore, time will be a key factor in my lesson planning. Additionally, I want to ensure that all students, especially those with diverse needs, are actively engaged in the learning process. By keeping these challenges in mind, I aim to foster a creative, inclusive classroom where all students can thrive and become the best versions of themselves. I would like to end with a quote from Robertson. Creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it the same way. This belief guides my approach to fostering a creative learning environment where students are empowered to explore their potential.